Welcome to Elder Care Illuminated, Torchlight's caregiving podcast. Elder Care Illuminated addresses the ins and outs and ups and downs of caring for your loved ones. Join us for interesting conversations with elder care specialists, geriatric care managers, attorneys, and ordinary people with extraordinary caregiving experiences.
Welcome to Elder Care Illuminated. I'm Lenore Tracy, your host and the elder care practice leader here at Torchlight. Listeners, there's a growing body of research showing that social isolation and loneliness, which, by the way, are two distinct things, impact the health and well-being of older adults. Social isolation is the objective state of being alone, while loneliness is the subjective feeling of being separated, disconnected, and at a distance, whether a person is actually alone or in the company of others. Studies have identified a relationship between both social isolation and loneliness and physical and mental health, such as heart disease, immune health, anxiety, depression, even Alzheimer's disease. Today we'll be talking to two young entrepreneurs who started a company on the West Coast to address the problem of loneliness. Madeline, Dangerfield-Cha, and Joy Zhang, welcome to Elder Care Illuminated.
Thanks so much for having us, Lenore. We're really excited to be here.
Excellent. Let's get started with you telling us how you came to start your company, which is called Mon Ami. You've written about the loneliness epidemic in college. Tell us more about that and how you got from lonely college students to lonely older people.
So we started Mon Ami while Joy and I were students at the business school at Stanford. Joy has a background in aging and healthcare, and I have a background in education and digital marketing, which lends itself to us starting a company together. But really, the idea for Mon Ami came from our personal experiences. I was raised by a single mother and my maternal grandmother, who is my best friend in the world, and just inherently understood the value of those intergenerational relationships in allowing you to expand your perspective as a young person and feel really safe and accepted for who you are. And we knew that that would provide a ton of value and meaning to other young people who had moved away from their families and were living in college for the first time, striving to figure out who they are. And Mon Ami can play a big part in helping them hone and discover that.
And my background prior to starting Mon Ami was really relevant because I had been a volunteer in dementia and hospice care since high school and through college and as a young adult afterwards, just because I enjoyed spending time with older adults, having not grown up around my grandparents and other family members. But for a young person, it was really grounding for me to spend time with older adults and to gain a perspective that you can't with your own peers sometimes. So we understood that as we saw the caregiver workforce experience more challenges, that there was a role for younger people to play in addressing the loneliness seen in older adults, but also for themselves. So there was a real win-win here.
It's pretty interesting, most of us, we grow up in a town or in a city or wherever, and we're in a heterogeneous community where there are people of all ages and sizes and shapes and colors and whatever. And then when you go to college, you're in this intense 18 to 22-year-old soup of all kinds of things. And I do remember it. It's very different. You land, if you're living on campus, you have a roommate who you never knew before, and there you are alone and maybe very far from home. And then there are all these over 55 communities and nursing homes and retirement communities. And once again, they're just completely separate from the real world. A long time since I was in college. Do you think that colleges are really tuned into what it's like for kids to be away for the first time?
Yeah, it's interesting because we got a lot of skepticism in the beginning that, why would young people want to spend time with older adults? Aren't they just focused on themselves? And they want to be with their peers and they want to be on Instagram. And when we surveyed our companions to ask what motivates you to spend time with older adults, one of the top 3 reasons we were surprised by, because it was about finding community outside of campus and really feeling connection on their own. And we had college students who wrote these stories about, feeling lonely when they came to school as a freshman. And it does get better. I think we've all experienced this, but the initial shock of it is really jarring. And for students who are able to get off campus and to talk with an older person and spend time in a different environment, I think it leaves them with a different perspective when they do go back to campus. And it helps them with that adjustment because they have a different perspective. So I think having an experience like Mon Ami, it's something we would have loved to have done in college to augment our experience. And we think that there's a way for colleges to break down those bubbles that form around them to be more integrated into their communities.
And there has been a push, I know, in high school as well as in college, for service education and for kids to be thinking about giving something back to the community. But I think you have come up with something that is really much more personal than a lot of other kinds of services are. How did you actually come up with the idea? And you're going to have to tell us about, you're naming it, of course.
Well, that is very close to our hearts. Joy and I participated in a venture design class at the business school at Stanford, which is called Startup Garage. DoorDash is a product of that class and has some really wonderful professors. And it really supports young entrepreneurs to focus on a customer problem. And Joy and I honed in really early on the challenge to family caregivers of having a loved one with a diagnosis like Alzheimer's commands your whole self in providing care, both to help them survive, making sure that their activity of daily living needs are met, but also in keeping their emotional and social life enriched and delightful. And the pressure of maintaining that over the many years that someone will live with a diagnosis like Alzheimer's was just overwhelming when we were listening to these women describe the role that they were playing in their families. And a lot of, honestly, guilt at not being able to meet it adequately, worrying that mom was going to die of loneliness in front of the TV despite her best efforts to visit every day. It's just such an exhausting burden to carry on your own that felt like a real injustice to us. So our first avenue into helping meet that need was to try and design toys and materials that would connect a loved one and their son or daughter or sister or brother in a really delightful and almost nostalgic way, because there weren't enough products in the market that were stage appropriate and exciting. And when we were testing different toy prototypes in a few Alzheimer's centers around the Bay Area, we were finding that actually the toy mattered not anywhere near as much as the fact that a young person was there for a really one-on-one connection with someone. At first, that was just me and Joy. But when we put the call out to students on Stanford's campus, we got 50 responses in 24 hours to our first email.
Wow.
Of young people just dying to take this opportunity to connect. And so we pivoted, which is a pretty classic startup move, but haven't looked back since. One of my first visits was with a retired Stanford professor of French, and he is my friend. He is Mon Ami, and that's where our name came from, and they're still part of our journey today. I still see them every week. And they're such a wonderful part of our lives. So they will always be on our masthead. And that's really sort of the heart of the program, is making those really powerful connections.
And I think that is a great story to tell on the business side, but also where there is a need for stimulating stuff, toys, products. And I see a lot of things out there, not to disparage them, like that allow older people to have some interactions with iPads or with Alexa or that sort of thing. There is nothing like human beings. And that is what people really, really want, because not only are you there one-on-one, You might hold someone's hand. You're looking into their eyes. You're responding directly to them. Now, there's just no substitute.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had a customer just yesterday tell us that it's been such a lifesaver for her and her husband because she called it ego protection because he has dementia and is physically able and not open to the idea of a caregiver. But when she suggested that a student could come and help him write up the things that he was writing for a writing workshop and could edit and help him type it and print it out and take it with him to his writing workshop, that just changed the dynamic for them and created a really wonderful opening for him to express himself in the company of someone else. And that really made it more enjoyable.
Tell us a little bit about some of your early matches and how, when you started to set this up and maybe unanticipated ways that people began to use your service, because it sounds really like a voyage of discovery. Every old person and every family is different. So what were the early days like?
Yeah, we did a lot of discovery in the early days because we weren't sure how people would use this and what their requests would look like. And we've learned a lot in the last year and a half. One of our early matches, and we call ourselves matchmakers because we feel like we're connecting you to different people who can spark something in your life and reconnect with maybe an old interest. So one of our early customers was a gentleman who has Parkinson's and was a former mechanic and engineer and loved working with his hands, building things and tinkering with old cars, anything that moved really. And they wanted someone who could come and build things with him. And because of his Parkinson's, that was more limited, but we have several students who are able to visit and make paper airplanes with him every Sunday. And they fly them and they talk about their flight paths. And because of his condition, it's a little harder for him to speak and to move. But the students who have the patience to understand him start to develop a really special connection and have fun together too. Another very popular request that we were kind of surprised about was memoir writing. People who say, it's impossible for me to sit down with my mom and do this, or I haven't had the time, but she has such amazing stories. It'd be great if someone could not just help her write them, but to be the listener and to be engaged in her stories because she loves telling them to other people. And so one of our early matches was with a 98-year-old Japanese American woman who grew up in Hawaii, and she had helped in the post-war reconstruction efforts in Japan, moved back to California, and they were looking for someone who could talk to her about that and connect on that. And amazingly, we had a couple of students who were also Japanese American and had grandparents with similar experiences, and one of them was a writer. And so she was visiting on a weekly basis to hear the stories and write them down for her and even write some poetry around it and share that with the family. It was just amazing.
That sounds totally amazing and very different. When I looked on your website, I noticed that your matches, your companions, they don't do any traditional care like a home health aide would, or they're not there for taking care of the body. They're really there for taking care of the mind and the spirit. And that's one difference that I saw that was obvious. Are there other differences in the services that you provide from ones that were already available or that you were aware of?
That distinction, we think, is really key, that the person who's helping you use the restroom or administer medications is really different from the one who comes into the home with no agenda other than to put a smile on your face, and that the quality of connection that can be available when, you have that ego protection, like Joy described, it's just pretty amazing. So that's why we see them really fitting hand in hand. It's not a replacement for helping someone get through all of their days. One of our customers described it as, it's not just existing, it's living with a Mon Ami companion. And that is the thing that we are striving for in all of our matches.
I like that idea of it going hand in hand with the other services, and the fact that you said you come in with no agenda, because for an older person who needs a lot of assistance, almost everybody that they come in contact with has an agenda. we got to get you through the shower. We got to get you through this meal, especially in a facility, whether it's assisted living or a nursing home. Not only does everybody have an agenda, but each aide has, if you're lucky, 4 people to take care of. More likely it's going to be between 6 and 8. And to just have someone whose agenda is to make you smile is pretty astonishing. Do you send many companions into facilities?
Yeah, we were actually very surprised about that. We thought that this would mainly be used for families caring for someone who's still at home to be able to age in place when they don't have all of the supports around them. But what we've seen is about half of our customers are looking to bring a companion into a senior living community, assisted living, or memory care. And what we hear often is that a lot of what they need, they can get from the facility. The basic physical care, making sure someone is safe, that they're able to use the restroom, that they have food and shelter. And the staff are really doing all that they can, but there is limited staff to be able to just spend an hour talking to someone. And
That's
so
right.
What the families do is they like to augment that with companion care, with friendly visiting, and to have a student who can spend 1 or 2 hours just going on a walk or just looking through old photos because they really need that quality time.
That is very special. On the family, sounds like they are the typical person, or they are the typical access point that brings you into their loved one. What's it like on the family side? How do they find you, and how do they make that decision to bring in Mon Ami?
We're really lucky to have an incredible network of word of mouth and referrals, because when people have tried the service, they've really fallen in love with it. So most of the families that we've served, over 70% of them, have come through a recommendation from another one of our families or from one of the partner organizations like the Alzheimer's Association that's familiar with our work. And they find us when they are, really starting to feel the challenges of meeting the needs of their loved one are, inadequately met by the mix of volunteer services or a friends and family network over, the long period of a diagnosis or challenges with their loved one's progression, and know that just a little bit of extra help could go a really long way. And we often describe the moment of hope and relief that we hear in their voices on that first phone call when they've described the challenges and are really in that emotional space of trying to hold everything together, but hearing that there's possibility to have a young person who could be the answer to their prayers. That's why we do what we do.
And for caregivers, and sounds like you do a lot of work with patients who have Alzheimer's or another dementia. The average length of time someone has Alzheimer's is 8 years. That means that there are a lot of people who may have it 10 years or 12 years or 15 years. That is a very long time. And the people who are caring for them, and I've sat in that seat myself, it's exhausting. And sometimes you're so burdened by the minutia of the day-to-day concerns that you can't just sit quietly and hang out. And so a companion who can do that does sound like the answer to somebody's prayers. So what do you look for in a good companion? How do you process your workers?
Yeah. Well, we talk a lot about, what we do is we help people find good company. We help them find someone who can spend quality time with them. And so what we're looking for is young people and others who have a desire to give back. They have great social skills, they're empathetic, and they're passionate, and they're kind. Really, at the end of the day, it is pretty simple. And there's a quote that we love from Vivek Murthy, the former Surgeon General of the U.S., who described this epidemic of loneliness, but said, the solution is simple. The medicine that we need is one another. And so that's what we're trying to do, is connect people who love being with other people. And young people are just so good at it because they are themselves. And that includes the energy and the enthusiasm to be there, to learn from others, to listen. And the success of a relationship is really built around being able to have connection with many different people as well.
Have you ever had a situation where it didn't work out and the companion and the person, they didn't get along, or for some reason this was not working? And if you did have that kind of situation, how do you find out about that? And then what'd you do?
What's really amazing is that there's a network of young people who are available to meet with many different interests. I started that first meeting with Ralph and Claudie, who are the French professor and his wife that I mentioned earlier, and we were working on his memoir. And after a few months, actually, of working together, we decided to introduce a second companion who speaks Spanish. And that is bringing out a different side of Ralph that I don't have access to, but that continues to stimulate and engage them both in different ways. So what we find is, having many different people with diverse perspectives and life experiences is actually the most meaningful way to use the service. And especially, students graduate, their schedules change. So we're making sure that there's new matches available all the time. And that actually is one of the big benefits.
So the person is getting to meet a new companion periodically, which does sound like a nice benefit. Do you train your companions in emergency management at all? You're dealing with old people who may be frail or ill or take a fall, which is not an uncommon experience. What kind of training do you give them to deal with a crisis?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we know that we are in a very precious situation. People are entrusting us to spend time with their loved ones. So we take that trust and safety very seriously. So when we onboard new companions, they are made aware of various scenarios that they may come up against and are given instruction on how to act in certain situations. And because they are not medical providers, they're not professional caregivers, they are not meant to administer any sort of healthcare or medical care. Their responsibility is really to be a good citizen and to call 911 and to call their emergency contacts when something arises, and to not try and pick someone up if they fall because you might do more harm than good. So there's just some situational awareness that comes with working with older adults that we make sure companions have. And really for families, it's, we hear a lot that it gives people peace of mind that someone is there to act on their loved one's behalf in case of an emergency, so that if someone is going to fall, that at least someone is there to help.
And dialing 911 is a really important service in an emergency.
Right. It can make all the difference.
Not to be made light of. So you started out on the Stanford campus?
That's right.
And it looks like when I looked at your website, you've got dots up and down California now. So how's that going? And how are you growing your presence in California?
It's been really wonderful. We were, pretty centered around the Stanford bubble while Joy and I were still students there, but the need and energy to be a companion is just as powerful and exciting on every new campus that we visit. And it really just takes a flyer or two to get the first wave of students, and then they tell all their friends. So it's been very easy to scale the supply. When we're looking at bringing in new families, it's really continuing to supercharge the word of mouth and letting people in the industry know that there is an additional option when families are seeking extra support. It's sort of a new category around companion care that we're helping people to learn about and to see its place in the continuum of what's available to families.
So the next thing you need to do is to get insurance to pay for some companion care, which would be an awesome thing.
That's right.
But that's not currently the case, right?
Currently, Medicare and most insurances do not cover exclusively companion care or socialization support. Although we're excited by what's happening in the payer world to recognize more of the social determinants of health, we think that your social health is incredibly important to your overall health and well-being, and it does affect other health factors. And so we would love to see insurers start to recognize companion services like ours as a vital component of someone's overall health.
I would welcome that to happen. It would be such a help to both the person who is getting the joy of the one-on-one companion time and also the family. So do you have any plans to expand into other states? Because there are old people in the Midwest and here on the East. Lots of them.
You don't say. I'm actually from Ohio originally, and Joy is from a few states in the South, most recently Georgia. So there are definitely pulls for us back Midwest and East. And we will expand to another state early in the new year, but we're still making our final decisions on where our service can make the biggest difference.
That is very, very exciting. And there are, of course, many colleges and universities and campuses that have students who would love to do the work, who could probably use the extra money. And I think incorporate it into their learning in a wonderful way that some other work opportunities would not have to offer. So in the meantime, while you figure out your business plan and how to conquer the world, which I hope you do, lots of people will not get the benefit in their neighborhood. So what are alternatives for them if I wanted to hire a local college student to spend time with my mom or dad on a private basis? I mean, what would you recommend until you guys are in town?
Which we hope is soon. The opportunity is so great. There are colleges all over, and wherever there's a college in a college town, there's an opportunity there to break down that barrier and to connect people. And the reason we started Mon Ami was because we saw how hard it was to do that on your own. And we had, we called them our early adopters who had really hacked their way into creating a solution that was kind of like Mon Ami, but with a lot more pain and heartache that went into the effort, where, people were emailing individual teachers and professors. And we had one customer who said, I tried to do this. I emailed the local school and I asked them if I could connect with a college student. And they kind of told me to go away because they thought it was creepy.
and you can understand that, of course.
Come and visit my loved one.
So, but with a service like yours, you can get rid of the creepy factor because you're actually a business. You're providing some training to the companions. You are monitoring the relationship. Oh, that sounds so hard for someone to call a campus and asked to connect with a college student. I can just picture the reception that they got.
Or posting on Craigslist. There are ways to do it, and you have to be persistent. It can be done, but it can be made a lot easier too.
And of course, then you bear the responsibility for vetting the people who respond to your listing. And so,
yeah, exactly. All of our students go through a rigorous application and a criminal background check, and we really do everything to make it as trusted and safe as possible.
And if you put an ad on Craigslist, you're not going to do that. The onus is on you. So I think you've got that. You've got some risk there, and you've got a little bit creepy factor, but you've got the risk. And for people to manage that on their own, and most people who are looking for a companion for an elderly loved one or somebody who is sick, they don't have the time or the skills and resources that you guys have developed in your business to do that. So I guess the pressure is on for you to expand across the country. You should follow the gray tsunami that they talk about, or get ahead of it, I suppose. Listeners, we have been talking with Joy and Madeline of Mon Ami. If your loved one would benefit from a regular companion to visit and hang out with, consider talking to your local senior center. There's an option, or a faith community, or a home health agency. Some of these organizations might have volunteer programs that would offer a companion visit, and some might offer some paid services, and maybe you'll get lucky instead and find that Mon Ami has moved into your neighborhood before too long. I want to remind our listeners that Elder Care Illuminated is a production of Torchlight, the online platform, and it is here for people who are supporting a loved one and their family to take care of that person while they have their own busy life to attend to. If Torchlight is not part of your employer's benefit plan, ask your HR rep to contact us at torchlight.care. Joy and Madeline, I want to thank you for being with us today, and we will be watching your business grow.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Elder Care Illuminated, a Torchlight caregiving podcast. Find other episodes of Elder Care Illuminated on iTunes, Spreaker, and Podcast Go. If you're interested in bringing Torchlight Elder or any of Torchlight's other caregiving products to your workplace, please contact info@torchlight.care. That's info@torchlight.care.